Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into a story that chills you to the bone, not just because it takes place on the highest, coldest peaks of our planet, but because it's a deeply human tale of ambition, love, and the ultimate sacrifice. Imagine standing on the very top of the world, thin air burning your lungs, the curvature of the earth visible below, and knowing that every step back down is a gamble you might not survive. It's a place where the line between triumph and tragedy is razor thin, a brutal arena where even the smallest mistake can be fatal. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soft noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Our story starts with a woman named Frances Arsentiev. Not the kind of person who just dabbled in hobbies, mind you. Frances was cut from a different cloth woven with threads of an almost obsessive determination. Even as a young girl growing up far from the jagged peaks of the Himalayas, there was this spark, this undeniable pull towards something bigger, something harder. She wasn't just daydreaming about white picket fences. Her fantasies involved white-capped mountains. It's a curious thing, isn't it? How some people are just born with an innate drive to push boundaries, to seek out the extremes. I remember when I was younger, I thought climbing the stairs to my attic was an expedition. Bless my naive little heart. Frances, however, was already planning her ascent of metaphorical and eventually literal giants. She had this quiet intensity about her, a focus that could make you feel a little less committed to your own daily grind. While others might have been content with a cozy life, Frances felt a restlessness, a yearning for the kind of challenges that tested the very limits of human endurance. It was almost as if the mountains called to her, a silent, ancient whisper only she could hear. And she listened. This wasn't some fleeting whim born of a midlife crisis. This was a lifelong ambition nurtured from a tender age. You see, the funny thing about ambition is it doesn't always care about your comfort zone. Sometimes it just grabs you by the hand and drags you up a really steep hill. As she matured, that youthful spark ignited into a full-blown inferno. She didn't just read about mountains, she studied them. Every crevasse, every icy slope, every treacherous weather pattern. It was a kind of academic pursuit, a teleological imperative driving her towards a singular goal. It's truly fascinating how a specific, seemingly abstract goal can reshape one's entire existence. She probably spent more time studying topographical maps than some people spend scrolling through social media. And let me tell you, those maps don't have cute cat videos, so you know she was serious. But it wasn't just the physical challenge that captivated her. There was a philosophical element to it. The idea of standing where so few had stood, breathing air so thin, it could barely sustain life, pushing past what society deemed possible for a woman. It was a statement, a defiance of limitations, a personal quest for meaning at the roof of the world. She wanted to prove not to anyone else, but to herself, that her spirit was as unyielding as the granite peaks she admired. And let's be honest, who doesn't want to prove something to themselves every now and then? Even if it's just proving you can assemble IKEA furniture without crying. The world of high-altitude mountaineering, especially back then, was a different beast. Less commercialized, more raw, more unforgiving. It demanded an almost monastic dedication, a willingness to sacrifice comfort, relationships, and sometimes even sanity. Frances embraced this ascetic lifestyle with a quiet fervor. She trained relentlessly, not just her body, but her mind. Because up there at 8,000 meters, it's not just your muscles that give out, it's your will. And Frances had an iron will forged in the crucible of her dreams. She was a living embodiment of the old adage, where there's a will, there's a way, even if that way involves a lot of frostbite and questionable dietary choices. This unyielding ambition, while admirable, also carried an inherent risk. It's a fundamental paradox of human striving. The pursuit of greatness often necessitates facing existential threats. For Frances, Everest wasn't just a mountain. It was the ultimate test, the final exam in a life dedicated to pushing personal boundaries. And she was ready to sit for it no matter the cost. She was, in essence, preparing for the greatest, most beautiful, and potentially most devastating performance of her life. Frances's childhood, though not explicitly mountaineering focused, laid the groundwork for her incredible resilience. She wasn't handed everything on a silver platter. Instead, she learned early on the value of earning your keep, of striving for what you wanted. There's this quaint idea that children are blank slates, but really they're more like sponges, absorbing every little nuance of their environment. Frances, I imagine, soaked up lessons of perseverance and quiet strength from those around her. Maybe it was a parent's unwavering work ethic, or perhaps the simple challenges of growing up in a particular time or place, but something instilled in her this deep-seated belief that anything worth having was worth fighting for. And sometimes that fight involved pushing your body to its absolute limits in sub-zero temperatures. Because you know why? Make things easy on yourself when you can make them really hard. I often wonder about the specific moments that truly shaped her. The small, seemingly insignificant events that, in retrospect, became pivotal. Was it a book she read, a documentary she saw, or perhaps a chance encounter with someone who spoke of vast, untouched wildernesses? It's a bit of a hermeneutic circle trying to understand the genesis of such a profound passion. We look for grand pronouncements, but sometimes the deepest inspirations are whispered. Maybe it was just the simple act of looking up at the sky and feeling an overwhelming sense of wonder, a longing to touch the clouds to stand above it all. I get that feeling sometimes when I look at my overflowing laundry basket, a profound sense of wonder at how one person can accumulate so many dirty socks. Different kind of mountain, same daunting feeling. Her early climbing experiences weren't on Everest, of course. They were on smaller, more accessible peaks, the training grounds where she honed her skills, tested her limits, and discovered the raw joy of movement in vertical spaces. Every step upwards, every carefully placed ice axe, every breath in the thin mountain air, built not just her physical prowess, but her mental fortitude. This wasn't about competitive sport for her. It was a deeply personal dialogue with nature, a conversation where the stakes were always incredibly high. She wasn't just climbing mountains, she was climbing into herself, discovering new reserves of strength and courage with every ascent. It's a curious aspect of human psychology, this drive towards the extreme. What makes someone choose to spend their leisure time risking life and limb, enduring unimaginable discomfort, when they could be, say, binge-watching an entire season of a show about competitive dog grooming? I suspect it's the purity of the challenge, the undeniable clarity that comes from being stripped of all superficiality. Up there on the exposed rock face, your ego doesn't matter. Your job title doesn't matter. Your social media following definitely doesn't matter. All that matters is the next handhold, the next breath, the next moment of survival. It's a powerful, almost spiritual experience, for many a kind of existential reset button. And Frances, being Frances, wasn't content with merely climbing. She wanted to climb differently. The idea of reaching Everest without supplemental oxygen became her guiding star. This wasn't just about making a climb, it was about making a statement, pushing the human body to its absolute physiological limit. It's a bit like deciding to run a marathon, but instead of using your legs, you decide to do it on your hands. Impressive, but also why the no-O's climb, as it's known in the climbing world, is exponentially more difficult and dangerous. It significantly increases the risk of frostbite, cerebral edema, and pulmonary edema. Your body just can't function as effectively at those extreme altitudes without the extra oxygen. It's a testament to both incredible training and a certain audacious disregard for self-preservation. But for Frances, it was the ultimate purity of the ascent, a true test of self-reliance against the vast indifference of the mountain. It was her way of truly conquering Everest, not just standing on its summit, but doing so on her own terms, relying solely on the power of her own lungs and spirit. There's an aging-related wisdom here. As we get older, we learn that true strength isn't about proving things to others, but about knowing and accepting your own limits and then perhaps gently nudging them just a little bit. Frances was definitely in the nudging business. She dedicated years to preparing for this specific challenge. Her training wasn't just about physical conditioning. It was about acclimating her body to extreme environments, building an almost superhuman tolerance for discomfort. She probably spent more time in altitude chambers than most people spend in their living rooms. I can only imagine the conversations at family dinners. So Frances, still trying to suffocate yourself for fun, but she was undeterred. The vision of that summit, untouched by the artificial aid of oxygen, was too compelling to ignore. It was her magnum opus, her final frontier. This kind of singular focus often requires a certain detachment from conventional life. Relationships, careers, even simple creature comforts take a back seat to the all-consuming passion. For Frances, Everest wasn't just a destination. It was a way of life, a philosophy that dictated her every choice, every sacrifice. And that in itself is a kind of summit, isn't it? The summit of human dedication, for better or worse. Frances's unwavering dedication to her Everest dream wasn't a solitary pursuit for long. Her path eventually intertwined with that of Sergei Arsenyev, a man whose reputation in the climbing world preceded him, a legend often whispered about in hushed tones as the snow leopard. Sergei wasn't just a climber. He was an embodiment of the mountain spirit, a force of nature as formidable and unpredictable as the peaks he conquered. His influence on Frances was profound, a catalytic reaction that accelerated her already blazing ambition. It was like adding rocket fuel to an already powerful engine, though, hopefully without the explosive outcome, which in hindsight is a bit of a tragic irony. Sergei wasn't just any climber. He was one of those rare individuals who seemed to possess an almost supernatural connection to the high altitudes. He moved with an effortless grace, even in the most treacherous terrain his body seemingly built, for the thin air and brutal cold. He was a master of his craft, meticulous in his planning, fearless in his execution. He had that kind of quiet confidence that instantly puts you at ease, even when you're standing on the edge of a 1,000-foot drop. Or maybe that was just me projecting my own anxieties onto the situation. I tend to get nervous, even on a step stool. Their relationship wasn't just a romantic one. It was a partnership forged in the crucible of shared ambition and mutual respect for the mountain. They spoke the same language, the silent dialect of the high-altitude world, understanding each other's unspoken fears and triumphs. It's an interesting sociological phenomenon, this shared niche passion forming the bedrock of deeply intimate relationships. Many couples bond over shared interests like cooking or gardening. Frances and Sergei bonded over risking hypothermia and frostbite. To each their own, I guess. Sergei's experience was invaluable to Frances. He brought a wealth of knowledge, a deeper understanding of the mountain's moods, and a strategic mind for navigating its complexities. He taught her not just the technical skills, but the subtle art of listening to the mountain, of understanding its rhythms and respecting its power. He was her mentor, her confidant, and her partner in the grandest adventure of their lives. It was a beautiful synergy, two powerful forces combining to become something even greater. Almost like a superhero team, but with more layers of down jackets. Together, they refined Frances's no-O's strategy, meticulously planning every detail of their ascent. Sergei, despite his own impressive track record, fully supported Frances's personal goal. He didn't overshadow her ambition. He nurtured it. This speaks volumes about his character. He wasn't threatened by her strength. He celebrated it. It's a rare quality, isn't it, to be truly supportive of your partner's dreams, even when those dreams involve putting themselves in extreme peril. Most people just want you to remember to take out the trash. Their shared passion was a double-edged sword, however. While it brought them closer and fueled their dreams, it also amplified the risks. When both partners are pursuing such a dangerous endeavor, the stakes are impossibly high. There's a psychological burden that comes with knowing that your shared passion could lead to a shared tragedy. It's a very complex moral calculus to navigate. But for them, the pull of the mountain, the allure of the summit was simply too strong to resist. I can only imagine their conversations late at night, poring over maps, discussing routes, equipment, and contingency plans. Every detail would have been scrutinized, every potential hazard anticipated. They weren't reckless. They were calculated risk-takers relying on their immense skill and experience to mitigate the inherent dangers. They understood that Everest demanded respect, and they gave it. It's a bit like playing a high-stakes game of chess with the most formidable opponent imaginable, where every move could be your last. Sergei's presence undoubtedly gave Frances an extra layer of confidence, a sense of security even in the most insecure of environments. Knowing you have someone by your side who is not only capable, but deeply committed to your well-being, that's an invaluable asset in a place like Everest. It's that feeling of having a safety net, even if that net is made of extremely thin air and a few frayed ropes. Their love story, intertwined with their climbing aspirations, became a testament to the powerful bonds that can form when individuals share a common, all-consuming purpose. It wasn't just about reaching the summit. It was about the journey they undertook together, the challenges they faced side by side, and the dreams they pursued as one. Aging has taught me that the best relationships aren't always about grand gestures, but about those quiet moments of shared understanding and unwavering support, especially when one of you is trying to climb a really big, really cold rock. Their shared journey was a beautiful, albeit precarious dance with destiny. They were partners in every sense of the word, facing down the formidable challenges of the world's highest peak with a unified spirit. And as they prepared for their final expedition, they did so not just as climbers, but as a couple utterly devoted to each other and to their shared ultimate goal. A quirky fact about Everest climbers: many experience a significant loss of appetite at altitude, often subsisting on surprisingly little food for days. I bet Francis and Sergey would have given anything for a warm pizza during their climb. The spring of 1998 was a whirlwind of final preparations for Francis and Sergey. This wasn't a last-minute road trip. This was the culmination of years of training, planning, and dreaming. Every piece of gear, every ration of food, every contingency plan was meticulously checked and rechecked. You know how you pack for a weekend trip and still forget your toothbrush. Imagine packing for an expedition where forgetting a single glove could mean losing a finger or worse. The stakes were a tad higher than forgetting your floss. Their journey began as most Everest expeditions do, with the long, arduous trek to base camp. This isn't just a walk in the park. It's an acclimatization process in itself, a slow, deliberate ascent through stunning landscapes that gradually transform from lush greenery to barren rock and ice. Each step upward was a negotiation with the ever-thinning air, a gentle coaxing of their bodies to adapt to the lower oxygen levels. I hear some people get altitude sickness just from looking at tall buildings. These two were voluntarily putting themselves through it, and then some. Base camp itself is a strange beast. It's a temporary city of tents, a microcosm of international ambition, where climbers from all corners of the globe converge, sharing stories, strategies, and sometimes a little bit of nervous energy. There's a palpable buzz, a mix of excitement and quiet apprehension. Everyone knows the risks, everyone respects the mountain, but everyone also carries that spark of hope, that belief that they will be the ones to reach the top and return safely. It's a fascinating study in collective effervescence, a shared emotional state that arises from intense interaction. Though I imagine the shared emotional state was mostly cold and tired. What set Francis and Sergey apart from many of the other expeditions was their approach. They were largely on their own, a testament to their self-reliance and Sergey's vast experience. No large support teams, no endless lines of Sherpas carrying their every need. This was a purist's ascent, a raw engagement with the mountain on its own terms. It made their endeavor more admirable, certainly, but also exponentially more dangerous. There's a certain romance to doing it all yourself, but romance doesn't keep you warm when it's 40 degrees. Their initial attempts to push higher up the mountain were met with the typical Everest stubbornness, unpredictable weather. The mountain has a way of reminding you who's boss, throwing blizzards and high winds at you just when you think you've got a handle on things. These weren't failures in the traditional sense. They were essential parts of the acclimatization process, a necessary dance of moving up, caching supplies, and retreating to lower camps to allow their bodies to adjust. It's a frustrating but vital ritual. You climb, you wait, you freeze, you descend a bit, you wait some more. It's less like a sprint and more like a very slow, very cold tango. Each rotation to a higher camp, each night spent at a new, more unforgiving altitude pushed their bodies further. They were essentially training their blood to carry more oxygen, building a resilience that would be critical for their summit push. Frances especially was meticulously tracking her body's response, listening to every subtle ache, every whisper of fatigue. She knew that her no-O's attempt required her to be in peak condition with absolutely no room for error. It's a level of self-awareness that most of us only achieve after eating too much ice cream. Despite the setbacks and the grueling nature of the acclimatization and rotations, their spirits remained remarkably high. There was an unbreakable bond between them, a shared sense of purpose that transcended the discomfort and danger. They were a team, a single unit moving towards an almost impossible goal. You know a quirky fact about high-altitude climbing? Your sense of taste can be significantly dulled, making even gourmet food taste bland. So imagine all that suffering, and you can't even properly enjoy a chocolate bar. Tragic. This period of waiting, of preparing, of enduring the mountain's whims can be agonizing. It tests not only physical endurance but mental fortitude. The constant exposure to the extreme cold, the relentless wind, the ever-present threat of avalanches, it wears you down. But Francis and Sergei were seasoned climbers. They understood this game. They respected its rules and they patiently waited for their window of opportunity, the brief elusive period of good weather that might allow them to make their final ascent. Aging it has taught me that patience isn't just a virtue, it's a survival skill, especially when you're waiting for the perfect moment to do something so incredibly risky. They were in it for the long haul, ready to face whatever Everest threw at them. Their determination was a tangible thing, a force that seemed to push back against the mountain's relentless power. They were ready. The question was Everest Part 5 the night of May 22nd, 1998 was the night, or rather, the early morning hours of it. At 1 a.m., while most sane people were deeply nestled in their warm beds, Francis and Sergei began their final audacious push for the summit. The air was razor-sharp, cutting through even the thickest layers of down. The kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it gnaws. Every breath was a conscious effort, a burning in the lungs that most of us wouldn't tolerate for more than a few seconds. But they were moving steadily, deliberately into the inky blackness that enveloped the upper reaches of the mountain. The summit push is a brutal affair, a test of pure attrition. You're not just climbing, you're fighting. Fighting the altitude, fighting the creeping exhaustion that tries to lull you into a deadly sleep. And for Francis, without supplemental oxygen, that fight was amplified tenfold. Every single step was a monumental achievement, a defiance of her own body's desperate pleas for more air. It's a physiological marvel, really, what the human body can endure when pushed to its absolute limit. My limit is usually reached after carrying all the groceries in one trip. They moved slowly, methodically, their headlamps casting narrow beams into the vast, unforgiving expanse of the night. The route was treacherous, a mix of exposed rock, steep ice, and deep snow. Every foot placement was critical, a silent prayer against a slip, a fall, a fatal misstep. I can almost hear the rhythmic crunch of their crampons on the ice, the soft whisper of their breath in the frigid air. It's a symphony of suffering and determination. Hours bled into hours in the sun. When it finally made its appearance, offered little warmth, only a stark, blinding light that reflected off the snow and ice, adding another layer of challenge. But with the dawn came a renewed sense of purpose. They could see the summit now, a distant, tantalizing promise shimmering against the sky. It's funny how a tiny visual cue can inject so much energy into a near-empty tank. Like seeing the "You Are Here" dot on a mall map after wandering aimlessly for an hour. The higher they climbed, the more the air thinned, and the more the toll on Francis became apparent. Even Sergei, a snow leopard himself, would have been feeling the strain, but he was carrying oxygen, a luxury Francis denied herself. Her progress would have been slower, more laborious, each movement deliberate and costly. This part of the climb is less about technique and more about sheer, unadulterated willpower. It's where the concept of homeostasis disruption becomes a terrifying reality as the body struggles desperately to maintain its internal balance against overwhelming external pressures. There's a unique kind of pain up there, not just physical, but mental. The constant headache, the nausea, the overwhelming fatigue that feels like a heavy blanket trying to drag you down. And the insidious whispers of doubt trying to convince you to turn back, to give up. But Frances had an iron will. She had nurtured this dream for too long, sacrificed too much to turn back now. She pushed through the agony, one agonizing step after another. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the only way forward is through. Late in the afternoon, sometime around 6 p.m. on May 22nd, Frances Orsentiev stood on the summit of Mount Everest, the first American woman to do so without supplemental oxygen. A monumental achievement, a triumph of human spirit and endurance. Imagine that moment, the world literally at your feet, the vastness of the sky above, and the profound silence broken only by the wind and the pounding of your own heart. It must have been an experience of pure, unadulterated awe, a fleeting moment of victory before the cruel reality of the descent began to set in. But triumph on Everest is often fleeting. The summit is only halfway. Getting down safely is arguably harder, especially after pushing your body to such extremes. Frances had achieved her dream, but at an immense cost. She was utterly spent, her reserves depleted, her body screaming for rest. This is where the wisdom of aging really kicks in. You learn that sometimes the greatest victories come with the highest price tags. In Everest, she always collects. The exhilaration of the summit quickly gave way to the grim reality of her condition. The euphoric high was replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Her body, deprived of adequate oxygen for so long, was beginning to shut down. The celebratory moment was tragically brief, overshadowed by the looming challenge of survival. She had reached the top, but now she had to fight her way back to the living. Descending Everest is often more dangerous than ascending it, and for Frances, utterly spent from her oxygenless summit, this grim reality was about to unfold with a terrifying vengeance. The euphoria of standing on top of the world quickly evaporated, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that permeated every cell of her body. It's one thing to push yourself to the limit to reach a goal. It's another entirely to then try to navigate treacherous terrain when your body is screaming for surrender. Imagine running a marathon, then immediately being asked to untangle a particularly stubborn knot while blindfolded. That's kind of what we're talking about, but with more ice and terrifying drops. The weather, as if it had waited patiently for them to achieve their fleeting triumph, decided it was time to show its true brutal colors. As they began their descent, a storm began to brew, the kind that whips up in minutes on Everest, turning a challenging climb into an immediate fight for survival. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at their clothes, threatening to rip them from the mountain. Visibility plummeted, turning the familiar landscape into a disorienting, swirling whiteout. It was as if the mountain itself was actively trying to reclaim them. Every step down was a gamble. The snow, previously firm, became sugary and unstable, prone to sudden shifts and collapses. The ice, previously offering purchase for their crampons, became slick and treacherous. Their movements, once precise and practiced, grew clumsy and faltering. For Frances, already teetering on the edge of collapse, each footfall was a monumental effort, a testament to her fading will. It's a cruel irony that the very thing that made her ascent so remarkable, the lack of supplemental oxygen, now made her descent exponentially more perilous. Hypoxia was setting in, stealthily stunning her mental clarity and coordination. Her decision-making, once sharp, would have become sluggish, her movements less precise. This is where the true horror of altitude sickness manifests itself. It doesn't just make you tired, it makes you dangerously incompetent. You start making small mistakes, then bigger ones, each one chipping away at your chances of survival. It's a terrifying game of diminishing returns. Sergei, ever the vigilant partner, would have been acutely aware of Frances's deteriorating condition. He would have been urging her on, encouraging her, perhaps even physically supporting her at times. His own body would have been screaming for rest, but his focus would have been entirely on Frances. This is the ultimate test of a partnership, isn't it? When the chips are down and every fiber of your being wants to give up, finding the strength to keep fighting for someone else. Aging has taught me that true love isn't just about the romantic dinners and shared laughs. It's about showing up when things are really truly hard. The darkness returned, thick and absolute, making an already impossible task even more so. Without the faint light of dawn or dusk, they were navigating by the narrow beams of their headlamps, which only illuminated a tiny fragmented piece of the treacherous world around them. It was during this period, battling the storm, the dark, and their profound exhaustion, that a critical misstep occurred. A moment of confusion, a slight deviation from their intended path, perhaps an overwhelming surge of fatigue, and they lost their way. Getting lost on Everest is not like getting lost in a city park. There are no friendly strangers to ask for directions, no convenient maps on your phone. It's a vast, empty wilderness, deadly in its beauty. Every direction leads to potential peril, a hidden crevasse, a sheer drop, an endless expanse of frozen wasteland. This is where the theoretical concept of environmental determinism rears its head. The mountain in its raw power dictates the terms of survival. They were forced to spend a night out, exposed to the full fury of the storm, without the shelter of a proper camp. This bivouac, as climbers grimly call it, is a last resort, a desperate gamble against the elements. For Frances, already in critical condition, it was a death sentence waiting to happen. Every minute spent exposed was another minute draining her life force, pushing her closer to the irreversible grip of hypothermia and frostbite. The cold was relentless, seeping into their bones, dulling their senses, stealing their strength. It's an insidious killer, slow and quiet, lulling its victims into a false sense of comfort before claiming them entirely. They would have huddled together, trying to share what little body heat they had left, desperately trying to survive until dawn. It was a night of pure, unadulterated hell, a vivid illustration of the terrifying reality that lurks on the slopes of the world's highest mountain. A quirky fact: at extreme altitudes, your body is literally dying slowly as cells don't get enough oxygen. So yeah, not ideal for a camping trip. Part 7: the wind, the biting cold, the disorienting darkness. It all conspired against them slowly, relentlessly. It was in this maelstrom of desperation that the most agonizing moment of their journey occurred. Francis and Sergei lost each other. Imagine the terror, the heart-stopping panic that would seize you, realizing that your partner, your anchor, your only hope in this desolate, deadly landscape was suddenly gone. It's not like misplacing your car keys. It's like misplacing your entire reason for breathing. The exact circumstances of their separation remain shrouded in the swirling snows and the mists of memory. Was it a slip of fall in the blinding whiteout? Did one of them stumble and the other, disoriented, simply miss it? Or perhaps in their hypoxic state, a moment of confused decision-making led them astray from one another. The mountain in its indifferent majesty holds its secrets close. But the outcome was devastating. Sergei somehow made it to a lower camp, albeit barely clinging to consciousness, while Francis was left behind, stranded in the most hostile environment on Earth. Can you fathom the emotional torment Sergei must have endured? Reaching the relative safety of a camp collapsing and then realizing with a sickening lurch of his heart that Francis wasn't there, that she was still out there somewhere in the frigid abyss alone. The sheer helplessness, the crushing guilt. It's a profound kind of suffering, knowing that the person you love most is in unimaginable peril, and you are too weak, too broken to go back for them immediately. It's a cognitive dissonance of the cruelest kind, where survival conflicts with devotion. Meanwhile, Frances was facing her own personal hell, alone on the slopes of Everest, without shelter, without her partner, her body ravaged by the lack of oxygen and the relentless cold. Every breath would have been a struggle, every thought a fragmented effort. Hypothermia would have begun its insidious work, slowly shutting down her systems, dulling her senses, wrapping her in a deceptive blanket of warmth before the final irreversible surrender. It's a bizarre, horrifying, physiological trick the body plays. The solitude itself would have been a torment. The vast, echoing silence of the high mountains, broken only by the shriek of the wind, can be maddening. There's no comfort in that silence, only the stark reality of your own isolation. It's a loneliness so profound it must feel like the universe itself has abandoned you. I've been alone in my apartment sometimes, and even that feels too quiet. I can't imagine that kind of solitude. It's difficult to truly grasp the scale of suffering involved. The frostbite would have been setting in silently, destroying tissue, turning her extremities numb and lifeless. The cerebral edema, if it occurred, would have caused swelling in her brain, leading to confusion, disorientation, and eventually the loss of consciousness. Her body was fighting a losing battle against an invisible enemy, an enemy that was ironically the very air she breathed. For Sergei, the brief respite at camp would have been agony. He would have been driven by an almost primal urge to go back to find her. But his body too was teetering on the brink. He needed time, even just a few precious hours, to regain some strength to gather what little supplies he could. The delay, agonizing as it must have been, was a desperate calculation for a chance at rescue. It's a pragmatic truth of survival. Sometimes you have to save yourself first, however painful, to be able to save another. Aging has taught me that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones where you have no good options, only less terrible ones. The sheer desperation of the situation is almost unfathomable. This wasn't a mistake that could be easily corrected, a wrong turn that could be rectified with a GPS. This was Everest, a mountain that tolerates no error, forgives no weakness, and it was slowly, inexorably claiming Francis. A quirky fact about Everest: some climbers report seeing third-man syndrome, hallucinations in extreme conditions where they perceive a helpful invisible companion. One can only wonder what fragmented visions Frances might have experienced in her final hours. The mountain had taken their shared dream and twisted it into a nightmare. Their bond, which had propelled them to the summit, was now stretched to its breaking point and beyond. This separation, unplanned and catastrophic, marked the beginning of the end for Francis and a profound, life-altering tragedy for Sergei. Part 8. Sergei's arrival at Camp 4, the highest camp on Everest, must have been a blur of desperation and fading consciousness. He was alive, but barely. His body pushed beyond human limits, screamed for rest, for warmth, for oxygen. Yet the moment his mind cleared even a fraction, the agonizing realization would have hit him like a physical blow. Frances wasn't with him. The weight of that absence, the chilling certainty that she was still out there alone, must have been a torment far greater than any physical pain. It's a primal fear, that feeling of knowing someone you love is in mortal danger and you are utterly powerless. I imagine it's like realizing you left the stove on, but the stove is on the top of the world and your spouse is the marshmallow. Despite his own perilous condition, Sergei's only thought was Frances. The mountain had already taken so much from them, but he wasn't ready to let it take her too. He stumbled around the camp, a ghostly figure in the thin air, desperately searching for any sign of her, calling her name into the howling wind, knowing full well the futility of it. Every breath was a rasping effort, every movement a monumental struggle against the insidious grip of hypoxia. This immediate selfless impulse to return, even when facing death himself, speaks volumes about the depth of his love and commitment. It's a profoundly human response, a testament to the powerful bonds that tie us together even in the face of insurmountable odds. He knew he had to go back. There was no question, no hesitation. But to go back into the death zone without proper rest, without adequate oxygen, was suicidal. Yet for Sergei, the alternative, abandoning Frances, was unthinkable. He scrounged together whatever he could: a single oxygen bottle, some rudimentary medical supplies, driven by a raw, desperate hope. It's a classic example of altruistic punishment, where an individual is willing to incur costs to themselves to help another, even when there's no clear benefit to their own survival. And in this case, the costs were literally life and death. The return journey into the storm-ravaged upper slopes would have been a hellish ordeal. Every step upward was a defiance of gravity, a battle against the mountain's relentless assault. The wind would have ripped at him, the cold gnawed at his exposed skin, and the thin air screamed in his lungs. He was moving on pure adrenaline and an unbreakable will, a man possessed by love and desperation. He was essentially a human-shaped automaton programmed with one directive: find Frances. Meanwhile, down below, whispers would have started circulating through the various camps. Frances Arsentiev, the American woman attempting Everest without oxygen, was overdue. Concerns would have mounted, hope dwindling with every passing hour. Other climbers, seeing Sergei's desperate ascent back into the storm, would have understood his mission, perhaps offering silent prayers, knowing the almost impossible odds stacked against him. It's a peculiar thing, the code of the mountains. While every climber is on their own personal journey, there's an unspoken camaraderie, a shared understanding of the risks and sacrifices involved. When someone is in trouble, especially high up, there's a powerful instinct to help, even when doing so puts your own life at risk. It's a nuanced aspect of human nature, this blend of fierce individualism and profound interconnectedness. And it's something you learn as you get older. Life's most meaningful moments often involve helping others, even if it's just reaching that top shelf for someone at the grocery store. Sergei pushed onward, his vision blurred, his movements uncoordinated, but his purpose clear. He was tracing their steps, searching for any sign, any indication of where Frances might have fallen or where she might have sought a temporary perilous shelter. The scale of the task was immense, trying to find a single person in the vast, unforgiving expanse of Everest's upper slopes in the dark in a storm. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack where the haystack is trying to freeze you to death. His journey back up was a testament to his extraordinary resilience and unwavering devotion. He defied common sense, ignored his body's desperate pleas, and faced down the very real specter of death, all for the slim hope of finding his beloved wife. It was a heroic, albeit ultimately tragic, act of love. A quirky fact about Everest, the death zone above 8,000 meters, is named as such because the human body cannot properly acclimatize or repair itself at those altitudes, leading to rapid deterioration. Sergei was essentially re-entering a place designed to kill him on purpose. As Sergei valiantly battled his way back up the mountain, a different scene was unfolding closer to the summit. Amidst the swirling snow and brutal winds, an Uzbek climbing team stumbled upon a horrifying sight. It was Frances. She was alive, but barely. Her body exposed to the elements for countless hours without supplemental oxygen was a testament to the mountain's relentless cruelty. She was a ghost in the snow, a fragile form against the vast, unforgiving white. The sight must have been utterly heartbreaking, a vivid illustration of the terrifying reality of Everest. She was in a state of advanced hypothermia and severe frostbite, her movements minimal, her words slurred and fragmented. The cold had not only robbed her of her body heat, but was systematically shutting down her vital functions, clouding her mind. The Uzbek climbers, though hardy and experienced, were themselves at the extreme limits of their endurance. They too were operating in the death zone, where every decision carries immense weight and every action demands immense effort. It's a place where even simple tasks feel like Herculean feats, and helping another person becomes an almost impossible demand. They tried to help her. They absolutely did. Imagine the internal conflict, the primal instinct to survive, warring with the profound human desire to offer aid. They attempted to administer first aid, perhaps tried to give her some warm liquids to offer what little comfort they could. But the resources at that altitude are impossibly scarce. There are no stretchers, no medical teams, no warm tents just around the corner. Every ounce of weight carried up the mountain is carefully calculated, and a full-scale rescue operation for someone in France's condition was simply beyond their means. It's a cruel moral dilemma, a situation where ethical imperatives collide with the harsh realities of survival. What would you do? It's easy to judge from the comfort of our couches, but up there everything is different. The brutal truth of Everest is that sometimes survival means making unthinkable choices. The Uzbek team, after exhausting their limited capabilities, faced an agonizing decision. They couldn't move her. She was too weak, too heavy, too entrenched in the grip of the mountain. Staying with her indefinitely would mean sacrificing their own lives, adding to the grim toll of the mountain. It's a cold, hard fact of high-altitude mountaineering. There are limits to what even the most compassionate human beings can do in such an environment. I often think about how we try to control everything in our lives, but then there are forces of nature that just laugh at our attempts. So they made the heartbreaking choice to leave her. But they didn't simply abandon her. In a final desperate act of compassion, they secured her safety harness to a fixed rope. A small gesture perhaps, but one meant to prevent her from sliding further down the unforgiving slope, offering at least a slight chance that someone else somehow might come upon her and be able to help. It was a gesture of hope, however faint, in a place where hope often goes to die. It's a bit like putting a lost poster on a rock in the middle of a blizzard. Not much, but something. As they descended their own bodies, screaming in protest, they encountered Sergei. He was climbing back up a man on a desperate mission, fueled by love and a terrifying urgency. Imagine the scene, two exhausted groups, one descending, one ascending, meeting in the desolate silence of the death zone. The Uzbek climbers delivered the grim news they had found Frances. She was alive, but in dire straits. They told him where she was, a beacon of horrifying information in the vast white expanse. For Sergei, this must have been a mixed blessing relief that she was found, but utter despair at her condition. This encounter, brief and harrowing, sealed Frances's fate and propelled Sergei toward his own. He now knew where to go, a precise location in the vast, swirling chaos. But he also knew the terrible truth of her state. He was rushing towards a woman who was already fading, a ghost clinging to the last vestiges of life. It's a profoundly sad testament to love, isn't it? The willingness to run towards danger even when all logic dictates otherwise. Aging has taught me that true love isn't always convenient. Sometimes it demands everything. The Uzbek team's encounter with Frances highlights a publicly debatable academic phrase, the bystander effect, in extreme environments. While typical discussions of the bystander effect focus on apathy in crowded places here, it's about the physical and logistical impossibility of intervention, a harsh reality that underscores the mountain's ultimate power. They weren't indifferent, they were simply overwhelmed by the brutal context. The mountain in its vast, indifferent majesty continued its silent work. Sometime after the Uzbek team's heartbreaking departure, the relentless wind and snow were momentarily broken by the appearance of two more figures, Ian Woodall, a seasoned British climber, and Kathy O'Dowd, a tenacious South African. They were on their own summit push, pushing through the same brutal conditions that had claimed so many others. Imagine their surprise, their shock when in the middle of this desolate, frozen wilderness, they saw a body. A human form sprawled on the ice, barely discernible against the swirling white. It's the kind of sight that makes your stomach drop, even if you've seen your fair share of grim things on a mountain. As they approached, a chilling reality set in. This wasn't just a body, it was a person, alive, or at least clinging to the thinnest thread of life. She was partially buried in the snow, her face obscured, but as they got closer, they heard faint sounds. Muffled words barely audible over the wind, but clear enough to pierce through the roaring silence of the mountain. "Don't leave me here to die." Those words, raw and desperate, must have seared themselves into their minds, an unforgettable plea from the edge of oblivion. Ian and Kathy immediately stopped their ascent. Their own summit dreams momentarily were put on hold. This wasn't about conquering a peak anymore. It was about confronting a profound human tragedy unfolding right before their eyes. They recognized the seriousness of her condition instantly. Her movements were weak and erratic, her body rigid with cold, her skin a mottled canvas of frostbite. This wasn't someone who needed a little help. This was someone desperately clinging to life by a thread that was rapidly fraying. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the universe throws you a curveball, and you have to decide if you're going to try and catch it, even if it means breaking a few fingers. As they worked to try and provide some immediate assistance, perhaps trying to clear snow off her a warm drink, if they had any, or just provide a human presence, they recognized her. Through the ice-crusted layers and the visible signs of her extreme ordeal, they realized it was Frances Arsentia, the American woman attempting the no-oxygen climb. Her story, her ambition was known within the climbing community. And now here she was, a living, breathing testament to the mountain's unforgiving nature. The recognition must have added another layer of grim poignancy to the scene. Their immediate priorities shifted from climbing to survival, not just for themselves, but for this dying woman. They knew that time was of the essence. Every minute Frances spent exposed in that condition diminished her chances of survival. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon, this sudden overwhelming sense of responsibility for another human life, especially in a place where self-preservation is paramount. It's a powerful illustration of human empathy's limits and resilience in the face of extreme duress. Most of us just worry about our online shopping arriving on time. While they were with Francis, Ian and his Sherpa team noticed something else that twisted the knife of tragedy even deeper. Not far from where Francis lay partially obscured by the snow, they found an ice axe and a length of rope. These were clearly Sergei's. The chilling implication was undeniable. Sergei had been here. He had likely been with Francis, perhaps even fighting to save her, before something forced him away. But where was he now? The absence of Sergei's body combined with the presence of his gear painted a grim picture of a struggle, a desperate attempt to save his wife that had ended in his own disappearance. It was a phantom presence, a silent testament to a hidden battle. The discovery added a layer of profound sadness to the already tragic scene. It wasn't just Francis dying alone. It was the story of a husband who had fought desperately to save her, only to vanish into the mountain himself. The mountain had not only claimed Francis, but had likely taken Sergei to a double blow delivered with ruthless efficiency. Ian and Kathy now bore witness not just to a dying woman, but to the remnants of a vanished struggle, a testament to a love that had literally gone to the ends of the earth and beyond. The scene with Francis was utterly heartbreaking. Ian and Kathy, despite their own exhaustion and the brutal conditions, immediately went to work, though work in the death zone is a desperate, agonizing dance against time and the elements. They tried everything they could, every desperate measure their limited resources and failing bodies would allow. Imagine trying to perform complex medical interventions while your own fingers are freezing, your brain is starved for oxygen, and the wind is trying to rip you off the side of a mountain. It's a bit like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded underwater during an earthquake. Except with more dying. They tried to warm her, to talk to her, to get her to move. They understood the critical importance of getting her off the mountain even just a few hundred feet to a lower, slightly more hospitable camp. But Frances was too far gone. Her body was a frozen shell, her muscles rigid, her consciousness fading in and out like a weak radio signal. She was barely responsive, uttering those heartbreaking pleas, but unable to follow even the simplest commands. It's a profoundly frustrating situation to be in, isn't it? To know what needs to be done, to have the will to do it, but to be utterly powerless against the overwhelming forces at play. For over an hour, they struggled. An hour in the death zone feels like an eternity, each minute draining precious energy and warmth from their own bodies. The temperature hovered around an unforgiving 30 degrees, a cold that seeps into your bones and freezes your very spirit. Their hands, even gloved, began to lose sensation, their fingers turning numb and clumsy. The insidious creep of frostbite was becoming a very real threat to them, too. It's a cruel twist, isn't it? The act of trying to save someone else might lead to you needing saving yourself. This is where the brutal reality of Everest truly asserts itself. In a normal environment, a rescue would involve a large team, specialized equipment, perhaps even a helicopter. But up here, at 8,000 meters, there are no helicopters that can fly, no large teams that can materialize out of thin air. Every gram of weight, every extra person is a burden that diminishes the chances of success for everyone. The logistics of a high-altitude rescue are so complex, so fraught with peril, that they often become impossible. This isn't a publicly debatable academic phrase, but a grim, undisputed truth, the inverse correlation between altitude and rescue feasibility. The higher you go, the less likely you are to be saved if something goes wrong. Ian and Kathy were faced with an agonizing decision. They had done everything they could. They had risked their own lives, their own summit dreams to try and help. But Frances was beyond saving. Continuing to try and move her would only jeopardize their own lives and potentially the lives of their Sherpa team. It's the ultimate ethical dilemma, a moment of profound moral anguish, where compassion clashes with the harsh, undeniable demands of survival. How do you walk away from someone who is begging you not to leave them to die, but they knew they had no choice? To stay would be to join her in death, to add more names to Everest's already long casualty list. With heavy hearts, they made the decision to retreat. It was a silent, agonizing capitulation to the mountain's power. They had fought, they had risked, but the mountain had won. It's a kind of wisdom that comes with age, the understanding that some battles simply cannot be won, no matter how hard you fight. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to know when to surrender to forces greater than yourself. Frances Arsentev passed away alone on May 24, 1998. The exact moment is unknown, lost to the indifferent winds of the mountain. She died on the route she had dreamed of conquering, having achieved her ultimate ambition, but paying the ultimate price. Her last moments would have been spent in the profound solitude of the world's highest peak, a stark and chilling end to an extraordinary life. It's a tragic, poetic end, almost like a Greek myth, where hubris meets destiny. Her death and the circumstances surrounding it sent ripples through the climbing community. It was a stark reminder of Everest's brutal nature and the immense risks involved in pushing the boundaries of human endurance. A quirky fact, a common physiological response to extreme cold is paradoxical undressing, where a hypothermic person might shed clothes due to a false sensation of warmth. One can only imagine the additional confusion this would cause in such a dire situation. For 9 long years after her passing, Frances Arsentiev's body remained on the slopes of Mount Everest. Not hidden away, not lost to the vastness of the snow, but there in plain sight on the main climbing route. She became a silent, grim sentinel, a macabre landmark for every climber who passed. They called her Sleeping Beauty, a tragically poetic name for a woman frozen in time, eternally resting on the mountain that had claimed her. Imagine ascending that treacherous path, pushing your own limits, only to be confronted by the stark, preserved reality of someone else's final moment. It must have been a chilling, sobering sight, a constant unspoken warning of the mountain's power. Her presence was a constant, unsettling reminder of Everest's indifference. The mountain doesn't discriminate. It takes whomever it chooses, and often it keeps them. The high altitude, the extreme cold, and the dry air created a perfect, albeit horrifying, natural preservation chamber. She wasn't just a memory. She was a visible, tangible symbol of the mountain's ultimate authority. It's a very visceral way to understand the concept of ecological footprint, but instead of impact, it's about indelible presence. The sheer impracticality of retrieving her body was immense. This wasn't a simple recovery operation. We're talking about a corpse at over 8,000 meters in the death zone, where every breath is a struggle and every ounce of effort is magnified. The logistics alone were a nightmare. You'd need a large team, specialized equipment, and an impossible amount of time and resources. The cost, both financial and human, would be astronomical, potentially risking more lives to recover one. It's an unenviable equation where the value of a dignified burial clashes with the brutal realities of survival. Most rescue operations in the mountains are more about live people, not recovery efforts, for exactly these reasons. So for years, climbers would pass her. Some would avert their gaze, others would pause for a silent moment of respect. A few might even offer a quiet prayer. Each one of them carried that image, that stark reminder down with them, a ghost in their peripheral vision, a testament to the mountain's enduring power. It was a shared burden for the climbing community, a collective unease about leaving one of their own exposed in such a way. The stories of Sleeping Beauty became part of Everest lore, whispered around campfires and told in hushed tones to new generations of climbers. She was a legend, a warning, a tragic muse. Her presence underscored the stark consequences of pushing the limits, a silent admonition to never underestimate the mountain. It's a harsh kind of wisdom learned through chilling visual aids that sometimes the most profound lessons are delivered by the dead. There was a growing desire within the climbing community, particularly among those who knew Frances or those who had simply passed her on the mountain, to give her a proper burial. It was a matter of dignity, of respect for the fallen, but the challenge seemed insurmountable. Who would undertake such a dangerous, costly, and emotionally draining task? It's easy to say someone should do something, but actual being that someone in such a situation is a whole different ballgame. The body, perfectly preserved by the cold, served as a stark reminder of the unique dangers of the death zone. It's not just the immediate threat of falling or exposure. It's the fact that what happens up there stays up there. The mountain doesn't release its grip easily. It keeps its secrets, and sometimes its victims, forever. It's a quirky fact that at extreme cold, human bodies can become mummified rather than decompose, explaining Frances's preservation, like a grim natural freezer. The burden of Frances's public, undignified resting place weighed heavily on some, particularly on Ian Woodall. He had been there, he had heard her last pleas, and he had been forced to leave her. That kind of experience leaves an indelible mark, a psychic scar that no amount of time can fully heal. It festered within him, a silent demand for closure, for a chance to right a wrong that was beyond his control at the time. It's the kind of unfinished business that haunts your dreams and whispers to you in the quiet hours. For Ian Woodall, the image of Frances Arsentiev, the Sleeping Beauty, was not just a grim landmark. It was a ghost that haunted his conscience. For nearly a decade, the memory of her desperate pleas and his impossible choice to leave her had gnawed at him. It was a wound that refused to heal, a constant nagging reminder of the limits of human intervention in the face of Everest's overwhelming power. He had returned from the mountain physically intact, but emotionally a part of him had remained tethered to that tragic scene. It's funny how sometimes the things you didn't do can weigh heavier on your soul than the things you did. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision for Ian. It was a slow burn, a gradual realization that he couldn't truly find peace until Frances was given the dignity she deserved. He had witnessed her final moments, and he felt a profound, almost spiritual responsibility to provide her with a proper resting place. This journey wasn't about conquering Everest again. It was about honoring the fallen, about finding a form of redemption, not just for himself, but for the collective conscience of the climbing community. It's a powerful example of post-traumatic growth, where a traumatic experience over time can lead to a deepened sense of purpose and compassion. He wrestled with the ethical implications, the immense dangers, and the sheer audacity of what he was contemplating. Returning to the death zone, not for a summit, but for a recovery, was unprecedented. It was a mission born not of ambition, but of a quiet, unyielding sense of duty. He knew the risks were immense, perhaps even greater than a typical summit attempt, because the goal wasn't just to reach a point, but to do something physically demanding in the most inhospitable environment imaginable. It was a kind of self-imposed penance, a pilgrimage of the soul. Ian began to assemble a team, a group of experienced climbers who understood the gravity of the mission and shared his commitment. This wasn't about glory or personal achievement. It was about respect, about giving a final dignity to a fellow climber. He had to convince them not just of the feasibility, but of the moral imperative. Imagine the pitches. Hey, want to come with me to the top of the world to move a body that's been frozen for 10 years? It'll be fun. Probably took some convincing. The logistics were staggering. Every piece of equipment, every bit of food, every ounce of oxygen had to be carefully planned and carried. They weren't just taking themselves up. They were planning to move a significant weight in an environment where even a feather feels heavy. This was a true test of their collective skill, endurance, and shared humanity. It highlights a quirky fact about high-altitude mountaineering. The carry system is meticulously calculated, with every gram accounted for, making such an undertaking even more complex. You can't just call a moving company for Everest. Ian's motivation was deeply personal. He had been there. He had heard her. He felt a profound sense of connection to Frances, a shared bond forged in the extreme crucible of the mountain. He knew what she had attempted, the sheer courage it took to try a no-oxygen ascent. He understood her ambition, and now he sought to honor her sacrifice. It's a beautiful, if tragic, example of the human capacity for empathy, even across the chasm of life and death. As he prepared, he would have reflected on his own aging, the toll that years of climbing had taken on his body. He wasn't a young man anymore, and returning to the death zone was a risky gamble for anyone, let alone someone with years of wear and tear. But for him, this mission was essential, a final act of closure, a way to make peace with the mountain and with his own past. Wahina has a funny way of making you reevaluate your priorities, doesn't it? Suddenly, that thing you put off for years becomes the most important thing in the world. The news of his intentions undoubtedly spread through the climbing community, sparking debates and discussions. Some might have thought it a noble quest, others a fool's errand, an unnecessary risk. But Ian was undeterred. His conviction was rooted in something deeper than logic or practicality. It was about honor, about compassion, about the quiet dignity of laying a soul to rest. He was going back to Everest not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker. The Everest Pole mission, as it came to be known, was a gamble of the highest order. It wasn't about setting records or claiming glory. It was about respect, about giving a final dignity to a soul lost on the world's most unforgiving mountain. Ian Woodall, driven by a decade of internal struggle, had gathered his team, and in May 2007, they embarked on this unprecedented and incredibly dangerous undertaking. This wasn't a standard expedition. It was a recovery mission in the most hostile environment on Earth, an act of compassionate defiance against the brutal indifference of Everest. It's like trying to gently move a priceless, fragile sculpture across a field of razor blades during a hurricane. Good luck with that. The ascent to the higher camps was grueling as always, but this time the emotional weight was even heavier. Every step closer to Frances was a step deeper into the past, into the memory of that terrible day. The team moved with a solemn purpose, each member acutely aware of the gravity of their task. There was no casual banter, no exuberant shouts, just the rhythmic crunch of boots on snow and the labored breathing of climbers pushing their bodies to the brink. They reached the infamous death zone, the realm above 8,000 meters, where human life can only exist for a limited time. Here the air is so thin that every breath feels like suffocating, and the cold saps your strength with alarming speed. This is where Frances had perished, and where they now risk their own lives to retrieve her. It was a place of profound danger, but for Ian, it was also a place of necessary closure. Finding Frances was both a relief and a deeply unsettling experience. 9 years she had been there, perfectly preserved by the extreme cold and dry air, a stark and chilling testament to the mountain's power. She was found in a resting position, almost as if she had simply laid down to sleep. The sight must have been incredibly powerful, a direct confrontation with the raw, unadorned reality of death on Everest. It's a publicly debated academic phrase, the aesthetics of death in extreme environments, and whether there can be any beauty in such a stark, preserved end. I think I'll stick with the aesthetics of a warm, comfy bed personally. The act of reaching her, of preparing her for movement, was a delicate and physically demanding process. Her body, though preserved, was rigid with ice. They had to carefully work to free her from the snow and ice that had held her captive for so long. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and fraught with peril. They had to be incredibly careful not to damage the body, treating her with the utmost respect. This wasn't just a recovery, it was a final, tender act of care. Then came the incredibly difficult task of moving her. Carrying a body, even a small one, down a treacherous icy slope at extreme altitude is an unimaginable feat. It required immense strength, coordination, and an unshakable resolve. They couldn't just drag her. They had to carry her carefully, respectfully, inch by painful inch down the mountain. It was a Herculean effort, a testament to the team's dedication and the power of their collective purpose. This mission wasn't just about Francis. It was also, in a profound way, about Sergei. His fate had been linked to hers, a tragic coda to their shared ambition. While Ian's immediate focus was on Francis, the thought of Sergei somewhere lower on the mountain, likely consumed by his desperate search for his wife, must have also weighed heavily on them. Ian had already found some of Sergei's gear earlier, confirming the likely tragic outcome of his heroic attempt to save Francis. This mission served to acknowledge both their sacrifices. The descent was slow and arduous, a painful journey down the same slopes that had claimed so many lives. But with every meter they descended, they were bringing Francis closer to a proper resting place, fulfilling a promise that had haunted Ian for years. It was a powerful, silent ceremony unfolding on the very roof of the world, a poignant act of humanity in a place often defined by its mercilessness. Aging has taught me that true strength isn't always about conquering, but sometimes about the quiet dignity of caring for the vulnerable, even in death. This was more than just a physical endeavor. It was an emotional odyssey for everyone involved. They were not just moving a body, they were carrying the weight of a tragic story, a testament to love loss and the enduring power of the human spirit to seek closure and provide respect. A quirky fact about Everest expeditions: due to the extreme conditions, many climbers lose significant weight during their climbs, sometimes 10 to 20 pounds or more. This recovery mission would have further taxed already depleted bodies. After an arduous, emotionally taxing descent, Ian Woodall and his team reached a location lower on the mountain, a place where Francis Arsentiev would no longer be a grim sentinel for passing climbers. It was a quieter, less exposed spot, still high on the vast slopes of Everest, but removed from the main thoroughfare of human ambition. This was to be her final resting place, a dignified tomb amidst the grandeur of the Himalayas. It felt like a sacred moment, the culmination of a decade-long silent promise. They carefully, respectfully laid her down. The cold, as it had for 9 years, continued to preserve her, but now she was at peace, removed from the gaze of the world. They draped an American flag over her, a simple but profound gesture of respect and remembrance for the audacious spirit of an American woman who had dared to dream bigger than most. It was a quiet moment filled with the vast silence of the mountains, broken only by the whispers of the wind and the soft prayers offered by the team. Each person, I imagine, took a moment to reflect, to offer their own silent farewells to Francis, and perhaps to Sergei, whose fate was inextricably linked to hers. Then, with immense care and reverence, they built a simple rock cairn over her. Stone by stone, they constructed a modest monument, a cairn that would blend into the natural landscape, offering a measure of protection and anonymity. It wasn't a grand tomb, but it was a respectful one, built by human hands, driven by compassion and a desire for closure. It was a testament to the fact that even in the most brutal and indifferent of environments, human kindness can find a way to manifest itself. It's a beautifully simple ritual, isn't it? To gather stones and create a lasting mark, a quiet homage. For Ian Woodall, this mission was his final act on Everest. He stated clearly that this would be his last expedition to the mountain. It wasn't just about giving Francis peace. It was about finding his own. He spoke of wanting to give back to the mountain, to leave it a better place, if only by removing a symbol of its harshness and replacing it with one of dignity. It's a profound statement from a man who had dedicated so much of his life to these peaks. It's a kind of personal and ecocentric atonement, seeking to balance the ledger with the powerful natural world. The Everest Pole mission wasn't just about a recovery, it was about honoring two lives, Francis and Sergei Arsentiev. Their story, a gripping narrative of love, ambition, and ultimate sacrifice, has become one of the most poignant and powerful tales in the annals of mountaineering. It's a story that transcends the world of climbing, speaking to universal themes of human aspiration, the unbreakable bonds of love, and the often unforeseen costs of pursuing one's deepest desires. Their tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of both the incredible strength of the human spirit and the brutal, unyielding power of nature. And what of Paul DiStefano, Francis' son? He is grown now, an adult, carrying the weight and the legacy of his mother's extraordinary life and tragic end. While he never knew the full horror of her final moments, he carries the memory of her ambition and the profound comfort of knowing that strangers driven by compassion ensured his mother was treated with dignity, even in death. It's a testament to the enduring human capacity for empathy, a ripple effect of kindness that spans continents and years. Aging has a way of showing you that even in the darkest moments, there are often threads of light woven by the unexpected kindness of others. The story of Frances Arsentiev, the Sleeping Beauty of Everest, is more than just a tale of a mountain climb gone wrong. It's a powerful narrative about the triumphs achieved at the highest possible cost, about the kind of love that can propel individuals to attempt the seemingly impossible, and about the quiet, unwavering compassion of the human heart that can overcome even the chilling indifference of death itself. It's a story that continues to resonate, a whispered legend that reminds us of both the fragility and the boundless strength of the human spirit. A quirky fact to end this chapter. Atmospheric pressure at Everest's summit is about one-third of sea level, meaning there's literally only about a third of the oxygen available to breathe. Makes that no-O's climb even more mind-boggling, doesn't it? The mountain sleeps now under a blanket of new snow, holding its secrets close as it always has. But somewhere high on its vast, silent slopes, Frances rests no longer exposed, no longer a haunting marker, but a spirit finally at peace, surrounded by the quiet majesty she so dearly sought. And though the winds still howl, they now carry a gentler whisper, a soft lullaby for the sleeping beauty of Everest. As the last light of day fades from the highest peaks and the stars begin to prick through the velvet black, I hope you carry a sense of the vastness, the beauty, and the profound stories that cling to these ancient giants. May your own journey, wherever it takes you, be filled with purpose, with love, and with the quiet strength to face whatever lies ahead. And as you drift off, may you find a deep, peaceful rest,